Hi, it's Look Movie Recaps again. I am recapping a 2017 crime and thriller movie. Watch out and take care. In the starting scenes, we start with Donald, who spends his days caring for his elderly mom Florence while also tending to the family farm in his free time. Donald works on his neighbor's broken car and he gets it fixed, but his neighbor is unable to pay him in full for the job. He instead steals a broken recreation vehicle, hoping that he can fix it and sell it back for a profit. He then urges him to get out of the house and enjoy his life, but Donald is too loyal to his mother to leave her. At night when Florence is going through the obituary in the papers, she realizes that everyone she knows is suddenly dying off. She gets worried, but Donald offers to stay in to keep her company, but Florence urges him to go out and enjoy himself. Donald heads over to a bar where he tries asking the bartender out. A group of drunk men cause a mess. The bartender heads over to clean up. One of the men begins harassing her. Donald intervenes, but one man begins to scold Donald for being an old man but still living with his mother. Before things can get more heated, the bartender tells the young man to leave. Donald leaves right after and returns home to his decrepit RV. He looks around and decides to just keep the RV for himself. While at home for the next few days, Donald works tirelessly on the RV until he manages to get it working. He brings Florence to show her the renovated van, hoping to take her for a ride to the spot where she and his father used to hang out. But Florence gets agitated and she refuses. Later, she brings him a pack of beer as an apology, and he drinks himself to bed that night. Donald dreams that he is in the forest. Suddenly, his mother appears before him. As he calls her name, she screams for help, waking Donald from his sleep. He senses that something is wrong. Donald steps from the van, only to see a man walking from his mother's house and a car awaits him. Donald runs into the house, and is shocked to see his mother's lifeless body on the ground. He calls the cops. They arrive and they start interrogating him about the incident. Donald tells them about the man he saw leaving the house, but the cops immediately start giving him a hard time. A few days later, Florence's funeral is held with a few people, including Donald's uncle Iman. A few days after the funeral, while Donald is in his front yard, he sees a car speed away from his gate after being noticed. The following night, Donald is trying to clean up his mother's room when he hears a sound coming from his barn. He grabs his shotgun and goes to check it out, but gets ambushed by two masked men. They force him to drop his shotgun, and they attempt to kill him and make it look like a suicide. They put a rope around his neck but Donald lands on his feet. As the amateurs gave the rope too much looseness, they forced him to stand aside, as they fixed their error. Using the distraction, Donald grabs a hammer and attacks one of the men, and they end up in a struggle. Donald manages to overpower the man and he smashes his head. He punches the other man to the ground and removes his mask, only to see a young scared boy. Reveals that they were sent to kill him and stage it as an accident. The boy had no further information to give. Donald considers calling the cops but he changes his mind when he sees the spot where his mother was killed. He gets the young boy, by the names of Bartos. He tells him to tell his boss that they completed the job. They then set up a meeting spot for tomorrow. Donald buries the dead man in his backyard. He enters his car where Bartos is and he hits the road. Pulls over after a while and begins to interrogate Bartos about the death of his mother, but he has no idea who killed her. He reveals that he was forced into this job as they kidnapped his sister and are threatening to kill her. Donald wants his revenge for the death of his mother. He convinces Bartos to work with him, in return to save his sister Kaya, to which he agrees. The two get to the meeting spot where they see a van pull over with a young girl. They enter the building but when Bartos sees her from a distance, he thinks she is Kaya. Donald grabs his shotgun and the two head over to the bar. Bartos enters through the front, where he meets with Gavigan and Jerome, the men who sent him to kill Donald. Gavigan asks for the second man and the proof that the job was done, but Bartos swears the evidence is on the other man's phone. Bartos just wants to see his sister. He saw her come inside, but Gavigan reveals that she isn't the one. They brought the girl but she isn't Kaya, rather another kidnapped girl who tried to run away. As Jerome held Bartos, Gavigan removes a hammer and uses it to beat her to death. Donald, who has entered through the back, sees Jerome disposing of the girl's body and locks the man inside the room. He quickly ambushes Gavigan and holds him at gunpoint, forcing him to drop his hammer. Donald realizes that he isn't Florence's killer, but must have an idea. Donald forces him out of the building at gunpoint. He knocks him down and throws him into his van while unconscious. They drive into the forest. Donald cooks a meal as they wait for Gavigan to wake. He eventually wakes up and Donald urges him to talk, wanting to know why they killed his mother. Gavigan begins to insult Florence out of anger. Donald presses the hot pot against his forehead. He burns his skin, causing him to scream in pain. After a few minutes, a tearful Gavigan confesses that someone above him wanted Donald dead, while Donald is trying to make sense of what he has just told him. Gavigan claims that Trevor and Frankie had gone to burglarize, but when Florence woke up, They were forced to kill her. Donal doesn't buy Gavigan's scenario. Donal leaves the van to take a pee, and Gavigan uses the chance to attack the boy and escape from the van. Donal grabs his shotgun, he and Bartos chase him. He manages to free his hands and he contacted Trevor, reporting that Donal is still alive. Trevor, who is in his car with Frankie, his boss, who turns out to be a woman, start to be worried. Back in the forest, Gavigan is able to ambush Bartos and beats him down, threatening that he will kill his sister after he's done with him. Donal suddenly appears, distracting him from killing the boy. This allows Bartos to stab him. Gavigan begins to whimper, begging for the men to bring him to a hospital, but he soon dies. Jerome manages to break himself free and report to Frankie about Bartos' search for his sister, but they cannot find her since they don't know her name. Frankie gets mad at their mess up and orders Trevor to personally find the girl. Donal and Bartos bury Gavigan in the forest. When Gavigan's phone begins to ring, Donal receives it and Frankie urges him to stop his madness before anybody else gets hurt. But Donal just wants to know why they killed his mother. Frankie implies that Florence was involved in something serious and has had a target on her back for years. Donal does not buy Frankie's theory, implying that his mother was just an innocent old woman. He warns Frankie that the target is now on her back, then he hangs up. Donald turns up to Uncle Eamon's home. He shows him a picture he found in Florence's room of a man that is not his father. Eamon reluctantly explains that after Donal's father died, the man in the picture, Joe, helped Florence out for a while. Eamon points out that Joe had a daughter, who turns out to be Frankie. Donal learns that Joe got involved with the wrong people, and despite Florence, who was trying to hide him, they eventually caught up with him and killed him. Donal then returns to the van and asks Bartos to look up the name Joe. He finds out that he was an associate in a string of political murders. Donal cannot understand how it would lead to Florence being killed. Donal determined to find Frankie and get answers. Bartos reveals that Kaya knows where Frankie's base is located, and finding her will lead them straight to Frankie. The two come up with a plan. Donal will pose as a customer interested in young girls. He phones and requests for Kaya, who now goes by the names of Alicia. They manage to get Donal a meeting with Alicia in the specified time. Donal and Bartos arrive at the location. He heads over to the building and meets with a guy. He hands over cash to him and is directed to a room. Donal comes face to face with Kaya. She is very scared of him at first, not believing that he is working with Bartos, but when she hears her brother's voice on the phone, she calms down and starts to trust Donald. The two cause a distraction, allowing Donal to knock out the guard. Donal asks Kaya about Frankie's location, but realizes Kaya has no idea, and Bartos lied to him. Without wasting any time, he returns to the pimp demanding to know Frankie's whereabouts. The man refuses to say anything. Donal presses a hot iron against his crotch until he talks. Bartos is distracted and not noticing Jerome making his way into the building. As Donald gets the information and is about to leave, they encounter Jerome and a struggle breaks out. The two men fight until bloodied, but when Jerome is about to get the upper hand, Kaya shoots him dead and helps Donal out of the building. The two siblings are happy and glad to see each other once more. A few minutes later, Frankie and Trevor arrive at the building to find Jerome dead, and the pimp in pain. He swears that he did not tell Donald a thing about her, but Frankie uses the iron to beat him to death. Donal recovers, and the three hit the road to turn up to the address that the pimp gave up. While they are outside waiting, Donald reveals that Frankie thinks that Florence has something to do with her father's death, but she must be mistaken. Donald spots Trevor leaving the location and follows him to Frankie's home, where he sees them talking. Donal grabs his gun to end things, but then sees Frankie's daughter come to stand beside her. He changes his mind. As they head back to their camping spot, they're almost ambushed by a gunman, but manage to escape unharmed. Bartos tells Donald to stop thinking that Florence is innocent because she may not be an angel like he thinks she was. Donal pulls over and almost gets into a fight with Bartos over his comments. He tells them both to leave. Frankie, on the other hand, is at home when she gets a call from the gunman informing her of his mess up. She blames Trevor for not killing Donal when he had a chance. Trevor tells her that she warned her not to kill Florence, but she didn't listen. Frankie then fires Trevor and tells him to move out of her house. Donal arrives at Eamon's home, only to find it covered in blood. Eamon also is full of blood and severely beaten up. Eamon urges Donal to stop going after Frankie. He tells him to call it a draw with his death. He reveals to him that Florence and Joe had an affair, but when Joe's rivals threatened a young Donal, Florence betrayed Joe to save her family. Eamon wants Donald to stop the cycle of revenge before also facing the same fate. Donal, as he stares through the window, he sees Frankie's car stop outside. Frankie sees Donald's van outside and sends in one of her men to kill both Eamon and Donal. After a while, Frankie hears nothing from her shooter, and decides to go in herself. She sees Eamon's body and that of her shooter, but she is too slow to realize that Donal has ambushed her. He holds her at gunpoint and disarms her. He forces her to get into his van. He drives her to the location on the beach where her father was killed. On the other hand, Trevor is alone in a shop when he gets the call that Donal has kidnapped Frankie. We shift the scenes to Bardos and Kaya, who have gotten themselves a room to rest, but Bardos is worried about Donal, so he decides to go out looking for him. He arrives at Eamon's home with a gun, only to see Trevor there sitting calmly. He asks for Frankie's whereabouts, but Bardos warns Trevor that if he got her, he is gonna kill her. He tells Trevor that he is leaving, but gets ambushed and knocked out. Early the next morning, Donald shows Frankie the picture of Florence and her father. While trying to explain why Florence did what she did, he began bringing her to a grave he had dug. In the meantime, Frankie explains how someone shot her father before his enemies turned up to finish him. She says that Florence did it. Donald refuses to believe, but Frankie assures him that Florence confessed to her before she died. In actuality, Florence was madly in love with Joe, that she actually put him over her own family. But when Joe refused to leave his family for her and tried to end their affair, Florence shot him out of jealousy, after which she called Leo to cover her tracks. Hearing this, Donal hesitates, and he struggles to pull the trigger. Frankie reminds him of the daughter she will be leaving behind. Donal, out of pity for Frankie's daughter, he stops himself from killing Frankie. He turns to walk away, but greedy Frankie attacks him with a shovel. She hits him on the head and he falls down. She runs to the car to untie herself and pick her gun. Donal recovers and loads his shotgun, and he goes after her. Frankie reaches the van. She unties herself and picks her gun. She loads it, but Donal already has her at gunpoint. He shoots her without hesitation. The film ends. If you've watched this far, thank you. Please subscribe for more of these recaps. Have a great day.